Welcome to your Flame Fundamentals training. Now that you've imported some clips into the media panel, let's start digging into the project's workspace so that you have a clear idea of the different sections and how that affects you as you start working in Flame. We'll start off with a high-level breakdown of the workspace, followed by looking at each section and how they all come together in the end. So first up, desktop versus libraries. Now the workspace is considered as the heart of your project, and this is displayed in the media panel. You can look at this in a thumbnail or list view, and you can even stretch the media panel to the full width of the screen to show even more clips and their metadata. All the functionality is the same, so display the media panel however you like. What is super important is that the workspace is divided into 3 sections: the desktop, libraries, and shared libraries. Your desktop at the top of the workspace is what you are currently working on. So all your editing, compositing, and grading is performed within the desktop. On the other hand, your libraries at the bottom of the workspace are pretty much your deep storage. You can also think of them as storage bins similar to other applications, but they are much more flexible than that. You can store media, edits, composites, and even desktops within a library. So on a basic level, you would store items that you do not need in the current desktop. This could include extra footage, graphics, slates, etc. On a production management level, you can create a comprehensive folder structure within a library that can organize your sources, work in progress, and completed work. So you could store edited sequences or multiple versions of those sequences for delivery, or maybe multiple composites that make up a complex production. You can even use the libraries to store variations of your desktop to track the progression, or perhaps roll back a job just in case you prefer what you stored earlier. I could carry on with managing stuff in the libraries, but the point I am making is that libraries offer storing stuff, and the desktop is your active creative area. Now, what may help you in defining the separation between the desktop and libraries within the workspace is that you can right-click on any section and give it a color. This helps to visually break things up a bit. In fact, any component in the media panel can be color-coded through a right-click. If you only wanted to see the active desktop in the media panel, click the Desktop tab to filter that section of the workspace. The same goes for just viewing the libraries. So you can see individual sections of the workspace, or all of them at the same time. Finally, the third section is the shared libraries for collaborating with multiple systems on a single project, but that won't be covered in this series. Now, as I said earlier, the desktop contains your active work across all the environments: Media Hub, Conform, Timeline, Effects, Batch, and Tools. This would be what you're currently working on, and this is where you'll spend most of your creative time crafting some amazing productions. Now, within the desktop section, it is further broken down into 2 types of groups. You have a batch group and the Reels group. The reason for having these groups is that Flame offers you a variety of workflows within one application. So if you are working in a timeline that requires editorial, grading, and VFX, you use the Reels group. But if you are only working on one shot that requires compositing and grading without the need for a timeline, you use the batch group. You can work in either group depending on the task. Clips can be moved or copied between groups, and everything can be round-tripped throughout Flame, since Flame uses the same creative tools throughout the application. This gives you the power to never be tied to one workflow, and this is what defines Flame as a complete finishing solution. Now, when you start a new project, the default setting is to give you one batch group and one Reels group in your desktop. You can add more groups by right-clicking on the desktop entry, but typically one of each group is enough for starters. Finally, since you have more than one group in the desktop, this eye icon allows you to choose which group you see in the viewing areas, like the Reels view for example. But more on that in a later video. The other main section of your project's workspace is the libraries. The idea is that you have a separate storage space away from the active desktop where you can store any items that you don't need right now. This could be sources, work in progress, or finished items. I also frequently use libraries to keep backups of my work, and you'll probably do the same. Now, upon starting a new project, you have one default library, but you can add more by right-clicking on the library's entry. The library is like a bin or storage container, and you can have as many as you want. The libraries behave like the Finder or file browser, and you can drag and drop anything from a single clip all the way up to an entire desktop. You can also create folders and organize things the way you like. Even if you had created an external folder structure, you can go to the Media Hub environment and import the entire folder structure, mimicking what you have on your external hard drive. So this is totally freeform. Now here are two very important points. Firstly, you can't do editing, grading, or VFX in the libraries by default. The recommended workflow is to load your items into the current desktop from the library, perform any creative changes, and store the new versions back in your library. Secondly, when working between the library and the desktop, Flame will always create copies of the items and not move them between the workspace sections. You can move clips between the different groups in the desktop, but when going between different sections of the workspace, it will always copy the clips. This gives you added protection of not losing anything in the library, as well as being able to go back to an original if you messed up the copy on the desktop. It is possible to overwrite items in the library or desktop, but you will be explicitly prompted to do so. Now, to reassure you, copying clips in Flame does not duplicate the original media on your file system. These copies are just tiny bits of metadata linking directly back to the same media. Please move on to the next video, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Flame Learning channel. Thanks for watching.